movement. Chun has arrived in the southwestern city of Gwangju, where the movement broke out. The trial is set to begin at 2:30 p.m. local time. Chun, who led an authoritarian government from 1980 to 1988, was indicted in May last year on charges of defaming late activist priest Cho Chul-hyun, or known by his Catholic name Cho Bi-ho. The priest had insisted during his lifetime that he witnessed the military firing at citizens from helicopters during the bloody crackdown in 1980. Chun denied the claim in his memoir published in 2017 and called Cho Satan, wearing a mask, and a shameless liar. The Gwangju District Court issued a subpoena against Chun after he repeatedly refused to come to the hearing, citing health conditions. And it's been around an hour since South Korea's former President Chun arrived at the Gwangju District Court for the hearing. We now go live to our reporter Choi Si-young, who is standing by at the regional court. Si-young, it must be bustling with residents and reporters. What's the atmosphere like there?
Well, Minji, I'm standing in front of the courthouse gate where Chun came through. Now, he came early, 2 hours early at 12:30. Now, he didn't address any reporters, nor did he make any statements. The hearing is set to start at 2:30 p.m. Now, Chun was last to trial 23 years ago when he was given the death penalty on charges of mutiny and corruption in 1996. Now, as you can see, a number of protesters around the courthouse demanding that Chun apologize for the crackdown against the Gwangju democracy movement.
If he had taken full responsibility for what had happened in Gwangju in 1980 and said sorry at the time, we wouldn't be having this chaos today.
If Chun appears before court today, I hope he delivers his apology to the people of Gwangju for the crackdown in 1980.
Si-young, can you tell us the charges he faces and what are the sticking points between Chun and the prosecutors?
Well, Minji, Chun is accused of writing false accounts of May 18th pro-democracy movement in Gwangju in a memoir published in 2017. Now, in the memoir, he denied claims by the witnesses that the government used military choppers to shoot at protesters. Now, in doing so, he called the late activist and priest Cho Bi-ho, who said he saw the chopper attacks a shameless liar. Now, that's defaming the dead, which is punishable by law under certain conditions here in South Korea. Chun would be found guilty if the conditions are met. First, Chun's claim of no chopper attacks is shown to be false. And second, he knowingly made his claim even though he was aware that it was false. Now, for the first of those conditions, the prosecutors seem to have overwhelming evidence, confidential documents from the U.S. Embassy in South Korea, as well as the results of a probe by the country's defense ministry that all say the attacks really happened. So the main issue here is whether Chun intentionally made his claim even when he knew it's false. Now, if found guilty, Chun will serve up to 2 years in prison or pay a maximum of roughly $5,000 in fines. That's all from me.
Okay, that was our Choi Si-young at the Gwangju District Court. Now, on May 18th, 1980, citizens of Gwangju protested against the dictatorship of the military junta led by Chun Doo-hwan, who took power through a military coup and enforced martial law throughout the country. Kim Da-mi tells us more about the historic 1980 pro-democracy movement.
39 years ago in Gwangju City, more than 200 people were killed and thousands more wounded by government troops sent to quell a democratic movement against the authoritarian Chun Doo-hwan regime. Known as Gwangju Pro-Democracy Movement, citizens and university students in Gwangju protested against the military government led by then-President Chun, who grabbed power in a coup after the assassination of President Park Chung-hee in 1979. In response to the civilians' protests, the military government deployed special forces to suppress civilians and employed brutal force, including the use of helicopter gunships, leaving hundreds dead and thousands more wounded. The former president maintained a repressive regime for 7 more years until 1987, when mass protests forced him to step down. Although the movement was brutally suppressed, it became the driving force for the June democracy movement of 1987 and is now considered to have been a pivotal moment in shaping democracy in South Korea. Commemorated for its role in South Korea's democracy movement, the May 18th pro-democracy movement has been designated as an official Memorial Day since 1997. 김다미, Arirang News.
39 years have passed since the pro-democracy movement, but there are still some disputes over what exactly happened in Gwangju, despite the government's efforts to verify the truth. And today's court hearing could provide a meaningful evidence to resolve some of those issues. Lee Min-sun reports.
It's been 39 years since the May 18th Gwangju pro-democracy movement. But still, many of the details of what happened are not clearly known, including who first gave the order to open fire on civilians. And that has been causing conflict and disputes to this day. There are suspicions that the state power at the time was deeply involved in slaughtering civilians and violating human rights. On March 13th last year, the Special Act to identify the truth of the May 18th democratization movement was enacted with the aim of identifying distorted or concealed truth from that time. The special law focuses on 4 areas: the civilian massacre by the military forces, responsibility for the initial order to fire, the suspicion that the military fired at civilians from a helicopter, and North Korean military involvement. Despite the multiple confirmation from the government that the May 18th movement was a democratic movement, some, including former President Chun Doo-hwan, still argue the involvement of the North Korean military. The Defense Ministry staged a special investigation and confirmed in February last year the use of military helicopters to fire at civilians. John's court hearing today will also try to find out whether he was aware of the shooting from the helicopter, which he has claimed in his memoir didn't happen. The process of establishing a Truth Investment Committee is still underway with a few steps left in the National Assembly. But the government is trying to move forward with the issue as resolving remaining issues is one of the top priorities of the current government. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
And for more, we have Professor Song Se-ryan from Kyung University joining me in the studio. Welcome.
Good to be here.
So for our international viewers who may not be so familiar with the case, can you give us a recap of what this libel case involves?
Yes, the recap and kind of follows what you have introduced this case. The brutal crackdown of 1980 produced a lot of different kind of controversial account. One of the priests, Jo Bio, has said that he witnessed the helicopter firing of civilians. And Chun Doo-hwan, when he published the memoir in 1917, vehemently denied it and called them names, called them liars, and as you said, Satan in priest's clothes. So that becomes a defamation. Now, because the priest Jo Bio has passed away, it becomes a defamation of dead persons under Criminal Code 308. Now, one sticking point at this point is whether, the proof that it is, whether it is true or false, that would be the first thing to prove from the prosecutor's point of view. But from the defense's side, probably Chun Doo-hwan would say that I did not know it, I didn't write it, although it's under my name, it was written by somebody else, so he could bring in a lot of different defenses. But at this point, because of the numerous investigation into the matter, it is pretty clear that the helicopter firing has taken place. Now, the only thing that it has not been determined by the judiciary so far, so this is the first chance to look at all those evidences and say that the court could determine whether there was indeed a firing of the civilians from the helicopter or not.
So before we get into the details of the case, so unlike civil cases, criminal cases require the defendant to be present at court. Now, Chun had refused to attend the past 2 hearings back in August and January, and the court has now issued a subpoena. Do you think this would be the main reason for him turning up today?
Well, that is true. I think that without the warrant, or subpoena, he would not have turned up. The first time he gave the reason that he was suffering from Alzheimer's, and second, he was suffering from pneumonia. But this time around, because of the warrant, probably that became a main motivation for him to make a trip to Gwangju.
So another significance is that the fact it's the first time for ex-President Chun Doo-hwan to step foot into Gwangju after he left office. And the trial is being held at the city exactly where the bloody crackdown was held. What's the significance of this?
Well, the historic significance is that that's the place where Chun Doo-hwan instigated or perpetrated a massacre of the civilians, and that became one of the milestones or a very big event that kind of started off the democratic movement in Korea. And because of that, the significance is probably the reason why the President Chun Doo-hwan, ex-President Chun Doo-hwan, did not make any trip to Gwangju. I mean, he's vilified and demonized in that region, but because of that cause of action arises in the Gwangju, he has to make the trip. His defense attorneys wanted and tried to remove the case from Gwangju to Seoul, citing the prejudice and bias of the people there. But they were not successful because there's no jury system. That probably is the reason why it would not be successful. It would not have been successful. So that's why he's in Gwangju today.
So the former president faces charges of libeling late activist priest Cho Cheon, like you said, also known as Cho Bio. Now, the priest had insisted during his lifetime that he had witnessed the military firing at citizens from helicopters, and which Chun says in his memoir were lies. But we've got multiple investigations showing that helicopters were indeed deployed.
Right. The Defense Ministry has conducted the investigations, and even the police had investigated at the time, and there are multiple witnesses, and there's some communications from the U.S. side actually said that there was a warning saying that if you don't disband, we'll fire from the helicopter, and indeed there was a firing of the helicopter. So I think those evidences, and at this point is the allegations, but at this point probably during the trial it will come out, and probably the prosecution would be pretty confident that they can bring in those multiple evidences to prove that there was a helicopter firing.
Do you think Chun will continue to say he was unaware of the attacks, given that there has been evidence that's showing there may have been helicopter attacks? We've seen buildings with the marks, so do you think he will still say he was unaware?
Well, that has been his persistent position even from the get-go. After becoming a president, he went down to Gwangju after he was elected. And his first saying was that, well, you made a mistake, probably you'll do better from now on. That was coming from the position that the crackdown in Gwangju was an act of restoring the peace from the government. There was inevitable actions, and that has been his position all along. And people know that his presidency or the rise of the power had a legitimacy problem from the get-go, so that his defense or his reason for action in Gwangju has not been taken very seriously by the people. But in terms of what you will do, he has never apologized and never said anything different, so I think he will be consistent in his position and or delusion, as some people say.
So a lot of reporters were wondering if he was going to make any remarks before he left for Gwangju from his house or when he arrived at the court, but there was no official statement. When reporters asked him questions, he avoided answering the questions. Do you think it will be the case, or do you think he will make an apology this time?
A couple of things. One is, if he says anything different, probably he would be overturning his position of several decades at this point. So that's something he doesn't want to do. But at the same time, if the trial continues, his defense attorneys might convince him that in order to get a lenient the ruling, probably he should be able to make showing of remorse and make some statement of remorse. But I would think that any kind of statement that comes from his mouth about that incident probably would be very prevaricated or very vague as to whether he would concede that he was the one who made the order or he was aware of it. Probably he would say something like, I'm deeply sorry that that happened under my care, but still he would have some room to deny that he was the person who ordered or he was well aware of that incident.
So how do you think the trials will proceed today? What are some of the points that we should be looking for?
Well, since this is the first time he appeared in the court, it starts with identifying himself because they want to make sure that this is the person they're putting on the defendant's stand. So mundane questions like what is your name, what did you do, where do you live, and those kind of things. And then the prosecution will lay out the charges and whether he admits or denies. So probably that's the first order of business. And another thing is that because, as you mentioned, he refused to attend the trial twice already by the reason of basically his health, Alzheimer or otherwise. So the court would be able to determine whether he's fit health-wise to stand for trial at this point. Now, there has been some reports about his health. Notably, he is still playing golf quite regularly, and he was very alert and very fit to do the outing of 18-hole golf outings.
Yes, it kind of overlapped with the day he was supposed to turn up for the hearing.
Right, probably a bad move on his part. So I think the court can make a determination that he's indeed fit, health and mental-wise, to stand for trial.
So considering his old age and the health issues, his former wife, former First Lady Lee Sun-ja, is also allowed to accompany him. What role is she expected to play during this trial?
Right. She is not a defendant in any case, but the criminal procedure allows, if for the reason of health or old age, the defendant can bring in a helper. But the Mrs. Lee Sun-ja cannot speak on behalf of his positions or on behalf of him, because that's the role of the defense attorneys. But otherwise, she can help him understand what is being said in the courtroom and translate or hold his attention to the trial. So that's the extent of her part. That is allowed by the law.
Do you think it will take a couple of more trials before a final ruling comes out?
I think so, because of the amount of evidences, because of those investigations that has taken place, and prosecution, although they might be confident at this point, they have to lay out all those evidences in front of the court and probably bring in the witnesses who can state what has been concluded. So I think it'll take some time.
What will happen if Chun Doo-hwan is convicted?
Well, the conviction by the law allows a pretty small sum of money, 5 million won, or if he gets incarcerated, it's less than 2 years. At this point, the court would take into account of his old age at this point. So I don't know if there will be actual incarceration, but because of what happened, the significance and his refusal to admit any kind of guilt or any kind of remorse, the court has a pretty big decision to make whether to give him actual jail time.
So he already has some $200 billion to pay back in penalty. Of this time, if he is fined, would it have a big significance, though?
Probably symbolic. He's been pretty delinquent in paying back what has been assessed on him. So whatever comes out as a verdict, probably it has a symbolic value. But that's why people are more concerned about whether he makes a statement that shows any kind of remorse or any kind of apology, but he has not.
So like we heard in the previous report, there are still questions remaining about the 1980 pro-democracy movement. Do you think this trial would be able to get some of the puzzles in the right place?
Well, there are not only the helicopter firing, but there are several issues that are still in controversy, although the investigations have leaned heavily towards the conclusion that there was not enough evidence to say that there was involvement from North Korea. It was a pro-democracy movement because of the illegitimate, the power grabbing of the then government. And the crackdown was very brutal. So I don't think that this trial would conclusively make any kind of headway into that, but I think that by resolving this, some of the sub-issues of helicopter firing, that would be a pretty big contribution towards making this whole thing very evident as to whether there was a purely democracy movement or there was some foul play along the way.
Do you think this trial would be a good example to see how other cases go regarding defamation of the 1980 pro-democracy movement? Because it follows controversy sparked by members of the main opposition Liberty Korea party who had made some defamation comments regarding the movement, calling the movement a riot itself, saying that it could have been instigated by North Korean forces. Do you think it will become an important point to see in the future cases like this?
I think so, definitely. I think that those people who defend those governments because of the sort of achievement in the economic side mainly, probably want to make argument in support of the government at the time, saying that because of the external forces that come in, there was inevitable actions that the government has had to take. But that argument has been growing thin by the day because of the multiple investigation. So I think that the contribution of this trial is to further dispel that kind of rumor or that kind of argument that the government acted in a way that is necessary for protection of this country. I don't think that the argument has a lot of shelf life at this point. I think a lot of people, majority of the people in Korea probably accept the fact that the illegitimacy of the regime at the time is the main reason. And if there was any involvement of North Korea, probably it's not any different from the peacetime where Korea has been suffering from usual spy activities, whether in times of Gwangju uprising or in peacetime as well.
So it's likely to be hard to get from the defendant, like admitting that helicopter attacks happened. And some people have said in the past that the memoir is actually a freedom of expression or based on Chun Doo-hwan's ideology. Is this kind of statement valid? Do you think the courtroom will take this as a valid statement?
Well, if it's a matter of opinions, probably there's room to say that there's a one person's opinion is as good as any. But this is a suit about the defamation of the deceased person, dead person. So the key point is whether that statement is true or not. And it's not a matter of opinion whether there was a firing or not. So that kind of argument would not be feasible in front of the court. It's not, fit to say that I think there was a firing, because if there is a firing, then, it's a matter of fact rather than opinion.
If he continues to deny the allegations, then what happens here on?
Well, if he denies it, that's why he's put to trial, whether the prosecution can prove that his statement is indeed true or false. So his defense could mount consistently that he did not know or it was not true. But if the prosecution can prove the case using those evidences, probably what we can say is that his defense failed.
Can I ask you for your insights on how you think things will proceed from today and here on?
I think that this is the trial that the prosecution feels pretty confident about, and the consequence of the trial is, I think, mostly symbolic because of his old age. But like I said, I would not really bet on the verdict of just the fines. But what we can expect is that, as we have been discussing, the small resolution of this case goes far in making a kind of a conclusion in the historic event that happened in Gwangju. Gwangju has been officially recognized the uprising in the name of, in furtherance of the democracy, but there has been consistent controversies so far. So this court case can be used in the future to say that by dispelling that, the inherent kind of defamation of that uprising itself probably will be a very significant event going on. So what I'm saying is that this court case has a judicial significance, but politically and as a resolution of a historical fact, probably this has further significance.
So many residents or victims of Gwangju were saying what they wanted was an actual sincere apology from the former president and that he admits the events that happened. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Stay tuned to Arirang News for all the latest updates. Thank you for watching and goodbye for now.
我的名字刘以豪，今年31岁，我来自台湾，我的职业是演员。我私底下的样子，跟我的狗玩，沙发上发呆，赖床。大家可能不知道，还有另一个我。跟着我一起来认识这充满活力的台北。一起走吧。挑一套适合自己的衣服，穿出个人风格，自信就是时尚。来逛街吧。